Good afternoon. I am Aditya Kumar from Invest India. On World Autism Awareness Day, we are lucky to be sitting here with Mrs. Manjeer Gupta, the director of the Parivartan School. So the Parivartan School has been working with a lot of kids with autism and other developmental challenges. So Manjeer, as you know, there are a lot of myths persisting about autism, so to say. So I would like to know, how has your journey been in Parivartan in dealing with these myths? Throughout your period of operation, how have you dealt with people? How have you dealt with stakeholders? How have you sort of contributed to dispelling these myths about autism?
So autism is invisible disability because on the surface the children look perfectly all right, but it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. There are information processing difficulties, there are cognition difficulties, and of course there are social behavior difficulties which are more pronounced because that is exactly when parents start identifying that there is an issue with the child. When a child is completely into his own world and he is not willing to interact with the outer world, so to say, and he has a lot of sensory processing difficulties. Now these sensory processing difficulties can vary from, because it's a spectrum disorder, so it could be mild, it could be moderate, or it could be severe. But all these children, whether they are mild or severe, they require early intervention therapies, and the earlier we catch on to the problem and we try to deal with it, we try to give them therapies, the easier it is for the child to cope in the world later on.
So Manjeer, as you said, the awareness about autism doesn't exist in India. So could we touch upon how autistic kids can be mainstreamed into society? Because you mentioned this aspect about them either being, people in our country either being in the mainstream or not. So how can they be mainstreamed, and maybe if you could touch upon how at Parivartan you are looking at this particular aspect?
So there are two ways of mainstreaming. The one and the simplest way of mainstreaming is accepting the child in a regular school. What happens then is when a child with an intellectual disability is accepted in a regular school, overnight you are sensitizing 800, 1000 to 1000 children, because an average school will have 1000 children, and you have to understand these 1000 children, again they are going to grow up and they are going to become the bureaucrats, the engineers, and they will grow up with the understanding of what a differently able child means, and therefore he will also know the nuances, what he can do, what he can't do, and they will be much more accepting of their peers. You're getting it? You know, schools can have one nodal NGO. Like 5 schools can have one NGO, right, zone wise, and that NGO could be hand holding them and running the inclusive setup there. So if they run into difficulty, we're there to help them. The second way that I think is for example, for my students to be given jobs. That's reverse inclusion, right? So if, for example, Rohit comes and does some work in Invest India, it could be just photocopying or stamping some envelopes, or in the courier department or whatever. Then again overnight the 40, 50, 100 employees that you have are getting sensitized. So the idea is for the mainstream society to take the first step. When you are accepting, it's then that the change will happen.
So coming from the point of view of employers, so in 2015 the United Nations observed the World Autism Awareness Day on the theme of employment, the autism advantage. So how can employers be sensitized that autistic kids may have some qualities, so to say, which can be made use of in their own industries?
So autistic children, most of them are very regimented, very routine oriented, and they love repetitive work. You give them repetitive work, they're experts at it. Now this is a strength that has been discovered as we were talking. For example, in London at the Heathrow airport or at the train stations, the autistic children are being given the opportunity to announce the timing of the train, because that's one thing they have to do over and over again.
Over and over again,
right? And they have an eye for detail. So if they are given jobs at the airport, they'll probably be able to identify an objectionable item much faster than the people who are there. Or I'd gone to Hindustan Petroleum for identifying jobs, and they'd already employed a Down syndrome boy who was doing the scanning much better than the other scanner, because he was not taking the regular gossip breaks or the tea breaks or things like that. So he was completely on the job. Right? So they're very sincere, and if you give them a job, they want to finish it. We just have to figure out what is the interest area, and then figure out what is a job that matches that interest area, and then develop them accordingly.
So Manjeer, you also said that early detection, the earlier it's detected, the better it is. So can we touch upon how to detect it in the first place, how to detect whether a kid shows symptoms of autism, and why exactly is early detection so important?
A brain development happens at a very fast rate till the age of 5. But with our children, biggest milestone is, first of all, they don't want social interactions.
Okay.
Even at 6 months, if the baby is not looking and smiling at you,
Okay.
then of course when you call out his name, he will not respond. So those are the typical things that you have to look out for. Okay. Other than being very cranky, maybe they have sensory issues, they don't sleep in the night. So those are the things that one has to look out for. And if the child is not communicating, and there are various levels of communication. One is your verbal communication, but even non-verbal communication, body language, all those things are important. The child is responding to communication. You know, and the minute you realize that there is an issue, I think you should rush into the nearest pediatrician or the developmental specialist and get on to his therapies immediately. Because the earlier you get on, and if he receives adequate therapy, then he might begin to communicate.
Manjeer, might there be a few industries where autistic people may be more suited to? Like, there's this whole idea about autistic savants, like maybe they can do very well in the software industry or in the sciences industry.
Absolutely, because they have an eye for detail. They do very well. In fact, even my moderate autistic children also, they love working on the computer. Okay. So they love designing. They have data entry skills. Okay. They're mathematically oriented. I have a child who does his HCF and LCM like that. Okay. Then I had a child who could actually tell you what day you were born. Like suppose you give the date of birth to him, he'll tell you whether it was a Thursday or. So there are a lot of these autistic savants, and we have to. SAP, for example, has employed about 10 or 15 autistic people because they are absolutely good at very good with computers, very good with programming, and so on and so forth.
Perhaps the last and the most important question: what can the community do to support this ecosystem, and what can the government do? What can all the stakeholders do to help out with this this condition?
The inclusion is not just important for these children. Inclusion is also important for regular children, because I see a lot of regular children take a lot for granted. So whatever they have, whether I keep telling my daughter this, that you take everything for granted. The fact that you can talk, you can dance. You come to my school almost every other day. You see that a lot of my children can't take these things for granted. So that will make them more grateful. They'll be happier with their lives if they're exposed to children who have nothing but they're happy with their lives. I don't say they have not. They have a lot, but they're trying to cope. They're trying to cope in a world that doesn't understand them. We are constantly encouraging children to participate in in charity work, in helping people out, in creating empathy. If the teachers, instead of taking the children to the zoo or the railway museum one day, take the children to the old age home, take the children to a school where there are different able children, spend a day there, work with them, teach them something. So that's, the society will start changing from then on.
Thank you. So we had a wonderful morning at the Parivartan school. We interacted with the kids, and we've had a first-hand witness and a first-hand account of how Mrs. Gupta has been steering this school for more than 10 years now. And some of the children have actually been rehabilitated, and they are working in different institutions. And the rest have been trained. They are being trained in baking, they are being trained in painting, and as you can see, there are some works behind us. All of them have been made by the kids of Parivartan school. And thank you, Mrs. Gupta. Thank you so much.